Good morning, it's Seay from Seay Real Estate here in Richmond, Virginia. This week I want to talk to you about final walkthrough inspections. Some contracts might call them pre-occupancy inspections. Most purchase agreements give the buyer the right to visit the home they're buying one last time before they go to settlement, just to make sure things are being left the way they're supposed to be left, and to make sure that nothing's happened to the house since they were last there. And another reason is to make sure that any items that were asked for on the home inspection have been completed by the seller as agreed. So the walkthrough inspection is an important part of the process. Sellers are asked in most contracts to leave the home for the buyer in what they call broom clean condition. And the seller warrants that everything will be in working order at the time of closing. And the buyer goes to look at the house one last time before signing papers to make sure of these things. So in an ideal world, if everything happened perfectly, a walkthrough inspection would occur maybe a day or two before closing. The house would be vacant and clean, and the buyer can get a great look at it. Any home inspection repairs that were asked for have been done, and the buyer can clearly see they've been done. Perhaps even receipts are left for the buyer to see that the seller paid to have this work done. And the house is just left as it should be left, sometimes even in better condition than it was when the buyer looked at it. Wouldn't that be a class act of a seller to leave it that way? And that happens sometimes, and we rejoice as realtors when it does. All walkthrough inspections don't go that way. Now, sometimes there are situations that won't allow the buyer to get that good of a look at it before closing. Oftentimes a seller can't get all of their personal property out of the house until closing has occurred or is on the verge of happening. Therefore, these walkthrough inspections sometimes happen with boxes piled up in the living room, and the buyer is unable to get a good, clear view of everything in the house. That's less than ideal. I guess the worst of walkthrough inspections happen when, lo and behold, a hole has been knocked in a wall since the buyer was there last. Lo and behold, home inspection items that were asked for and agreed to have not been done. Perhaps the grass is 3 feet tall in the yard. There's lots of things that can make a final walkthrough inspection not go well, and that's not good for anybody involved. Even the seller who left it that way is oftentimes hurting themselves, because they could create a situation where closing doesn't occur and they can't get on with the plans that they had. So as realtors, we encourage our sellers to leave the property as the contract sets forth. And we encourage our sellers or buyers to get a good look at it and make sure they're comfortable with the house before they go to closing. Theoretically, I mean, they have the right to say, no, it's just not being left the way the contract said, and I'd rather not go to closing. Now, give and take and being reasonable oftentimes is part of this process. As a buyer and a seller work it out through their agents, the seller explains, I'm sorry, we just can't have everything out of the way, and until we get it out of the way, we can't really clean, but we promise you this is going to happen. And a lot of times buyers will go to closing in good faith that it will in fact happen. In some situations, some of the seller's money is held in escrow to make sure that the property is cleaned up before closing. And if the buyer gets there after closing and finds out it's not, well, that money's been set aside to ensure that it will be. So that's a little bit about walkthrough inspections. A real quick story, I don't do this often, but just to show you a story of one that went bad. Final walkthrough inspection, my listing. The agent goes to the walkthrough inspection, calls our office, hey, there's this old furniture left in the house that's just ratty and nobody wants it and it wasn't supposed to be here. Please get it out. We call our seller. You left a lot of furniture in the house. You're not supposed to do that. Please get it out of the house. The seller calls. It's out of the house. Confirmation on the phone. It's out of the house. Nobody goes to check. The buyer's agent doesn't go check. They close. The buyers go to the house, and sure enough, everything's out of the house. Everything's great. until they find that all the furniture had been dumped in the woods behind the house. That's bad. So obviously legal actions ensued, and they should have. That was just a wrong and a bad thing to do. But most walkthrough inspections go very well. And it's very easy to follow what the contract says and leave the house for the buyer in that shape. And that happens 98% of the time. That's a little bit about walkthrough inspections. I'm Chad Seay with Seay Real Estate.